working on my Cummins Onan 40 kilowatt generator. I've owned this since 2004. It's a 1999 unit, so I've had it for 20 years. Had a few little problems over the years, nothing major. 4-cylinder Cummins diesel. It's got a dual insulated heated tank, fuel tank, heated water jacket, soundproofing. It actually came out of a Sprint long distance switching center up in, I believe, Milwaukee, maybe Wisconsin. So it was a good unit. Still is a good unit. But today I've been having a problem when it starts up, and it starts up automatically once a week for me to test everything. It comes up and the voltage is only about 50 volts, and it shows the RPM of the engine only about 50 RPM, which I know is incorrect. It's got a separate controller for the RPM. I've checked the RPM with a tachometer, and I know it's running at 1800 RPM. But what happens is all the voltages are low and the meters indicate low. So I've had this problem in the past, and it's been the voltage regulator board. So today we're going to be changing the voltage regulator board and see if that takes care of the problem. So before I start the repair, I'm going to start the generator up and see if it'll exhibit the issue. It's an intermittent issue, and I want to see if it'll show what it's doing here on camera before I replace it. It probably won't. It's like going to the dentist. Your tooth stops hurting when you get there. But anyway, I'm going to start it up and see what the meters indicate. As expected, it worked perfectly. You know, they came up, it showed 60 hertz, which is 1800 RPM. It showed 240 volts, which is what this unit puts out. So that's exactly what's going on. So I put this, it's in a stop mode, and this tells me the switch is off, which tells me the automatic transfer switch won't start it. But since I'm going to be in here working with high voltage potential wires, I'm going to go ahead and disconnect the battery in here. I'm going to take the negative post off the battery, so even if it does somehow get a signal to start, it won't start. It'll be safe that way. So I don't have to lock out and tag out since I'm the only one working here. So I'm going to go ahead and disconnect that negative battery post, and then we'll start working. The voltage regulator board is behind this control panel, which I'll open up here. It's this board back here, pretty big board. Got quite a few connections on it, and I've marked some of the connections with tape when it's been like two black wires. It's probably irrelevant which one goes on which, but I want to make sure I get them back in exactly the same position. It's got some jumpers on it, which I'll set up on the new board, like this one, and along with the manual. So I'm going to go inside and set up the new board, and I'll be back. Okay, here's our replacement board. This is an OEM replacement. The last time I replaced this board, OEM replacements weren't available, and I had to get an aftermarket board. So I thought since the OEMs are available again, I would get the OEM board. I think it may be a little better choice than the aftermarket one. A couple things you need to set up on this board. There's a jumper here. This selects the size of the generator, and we're a 40 kilowatt, and this selection here is less than 90 kilowatts. So that's exactly what we have there. This jumper here is for 50-60 hertz and the number of poles your generator has. We have a 4-pole generator, and it's 60 hertz, so that goes to the 2 outside terminals. It's important that you not only check the board coming out, that you put the jumpers in the exact same selection place, but you also need to check with the manual. I had experience with this many years ago. I was a new guy working for a company, big international company, and I'd only been on the job maybe a month, And I came in early one morning, and the entire crew from my company had been working on this particular machine all night long, and they couldn't seem to get it fixed. And the head engineer came over and he goes, "We've tried everything. Maybe you can give us a hand." I said, "Well, why didn't you call me last night?" "Well, you're the new guy. We didn't figure you knew much." So the guy he started the machine up and showed me what he was doing, and I immediately knew which board controlled the function that we're having problems with. So I shut the machine down and went over and pulled the board out. And he said, "We've changed that board 3 times. Same thing." I said, "Okay." I pulled the board out and I started looking over all the jumpers and the switch settings and everything. And I noticed the switch was in the wrong position. So I flipped the one little switch, I put it back in and started the machine up, and it worked fine. So this was a prime example of somebody that pulls a board out and either missed it the first time or put it in the wrong position, and then everybody that changed the board after that put the switch in the same position, not knowing what it really did. So it's important to know what things do, not just copy what's coming out, because that may be the problem, especially if you're following someone else's work. So something to think about. So anyway, I know these are correct because one, the board I pulled out was like this, and I checked them against the manual, so I know that they're in the right position. So a few things we have to do. This is a voltage adjustment pot. I'll probably have to change that. I will need to take this jumper out because I also have an external voltage adjust, which this bypasses that. So I'm going to do all that. I also have taken some photos so that I can be sure I get the wires in the same place. I'm going to try to do a 1-for-1 replacement as I put the boards next to each other, but sometimes with the length of the wires and the accessibility, you can't do that. So it's always good to have some pictures or diagrams or a list to go by. So that's what I'm going to do next. I also want to give a shout out to the folks that supplied me with the parts. Short for ASAP, it's at Advanced Service and Parts, LLC. They're out of Lebanon, Pennsylvania. They got a website that's partsfortex.com, and I'll leave a link down in the comments below. They're very helpful. They have a good catalog, a lot of different parts for generators of all different types. So give them a try if you ever need any parts for generators. Like I said, it's Advanced Service and Parts, ASAP. All right, this may not be the best vantage point, but it's about the best I can do here by myself. So I'm going to start working on this. I'm going to first take out the mounting screws. There's 6 of those guys here. I'm going to take out probably 4 or 5 of them before I try to wiggle out the board. I've disconnected the battery so there's no way it can start up and try to shock me or hurt me or anything. Have a tight fit in here for sure. Luckily, it's a pretty warm day out here. It's January here in Virginia, but today we got almost a 70-degree day, which I'm ecstatic about. I don't like the cold. Certainly don't like working in the cold. All right, this should be the last screw out of here. We'll see if we can wiggle it out so we can maybe start transferring some wires. Okay. go. And get my replacement board, and I'll set it up in there, and we'll start moving some wires. And I got my replacement board here. If I can wiggle it into position. Get it lined up on the screw posts. The bad thing about these boards, well, it's a good and a bad thing, is they're conformally coated, which means it's got this epoxy around all the components, which keeps them thermally protected against heat and cold and temperature changes. The problem is you can't work on it. There's no way to get in there chipping the epoxy out. You really can't measure anything. It's impossible to work on. So for that reason, and I'm sure it's done for that reason, you have to just replace the unit instead of working on it. So, and now I understand why it's conformally coated. It's out in the weather, hot and cold all the time. Snug them all up now. I see I missed a jumper that I should have removed. Let me get my needle nose. I need these to pull the connections on and off anyway. Small jumper there. This one doesn't have it. And I will start here at the bottom because that's where it gets a little complex. There's a white and a black. And the white's on top, and they're on the bottom two terminals. In fact, that's where that jumper was. The white was on top, so we'll be sure the white goes on top again. Okay. The next one's a double connector. It's got both a white and a black. It goes on the second from the top connector. That one's going to be a little stretch. It's a little tight here across here, so we'll make it work. That way we can be sure we don't screw anything up. Okay, and the next one is another double. Goes on the one just above that. Okay. Next one is a white connector, white wire, which goes on the terminal, bottom terminal there. Then we got two black wires, and I marked one with a red piece of tape. That one goes on the top, and I have them tie wrapped together so that I know they're a pair. And the red one goes on top, which is that one, so this one goes on the bottom. And again, that's the red one on top. And that's a red wire. And that is one part of a double. which goes to the second connector on the next set of terminals. Let me get that off. So that goes on the second connector. And then this one goes on the top connector. That didn't feel right. There we go. Alright, this yellow one goes on the first connector of that top terminal. White one goes on the second one. And this black one goes on the top one. Nothing on this connector, proper jumper. Then we have two black wires which go on the bottom two here. And again, the red tape one goes on top. And I have them tied together as a pair, so we'll move them as a pair and we'll get the board out of the way. Red one on the top. Okay, so that's all the connections. I'm going to go and get my picture that I took and compare that I have everything in the right place, and we'll button it up and start it and see what happens. Okay, the voltage adjust. I can get a picture here. There's that top left pot there. Once I've got this handy dandy little insulated trimmer pot. So I adjusted it close. This is an analog meter. So I adjusted it close. Put my digital meter on it and I got it at 239. Now I'm going to adjust the trimmer. What I'm going to do now is I have a 20 kilowatt load here on the front of the generator. Basically it's like two big oven elements in there, and this allows a real test on the generator. So I'm going to switch in the 210 kilowatt elements to give me 20 kilowatts of load. So my voltage stayed steady. The current went up to almost 90 amps, which you can do the math. That's about 20 kilowatts at 240 volts. So I know it's running, it's working. And now I can have a little more confidence when it starts up and I'm not here that it's going to run everything. Well guys, thanks for watching. If you like this, please like and subscribe. It'll help me out. Thanks.